Om Yam Brahma Varnindra Marutaha Shtanvanti Devoishtavoi Vedayi Sangapada Kramo Panashadoi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyan Vashtita Tadgatena Manasha Pashanti Yam Yogino Yashantam Navidduhu Sura Suragana Devaya Tashmai Namaha Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Our eternal salutations to that one who is the truth of life and existence, and whom the saints and sages call by various names. Our eternal salutations to that one whose glories are sung in the various hymns of the different religious traditions of the world, but whose infinite and undying grandeur no mortal mind can comprehend. Our eternal salutations to that one upon whom the devotees meditate in the shrine of their heart, realizing an ineffable presence in their deepest contemplations. May he prompt our minds toward the path of truth and righteousness. May she reveal herself into our souls and dispel the gloom of death, fear, doubt, and darkness. Om peace, peace, peace. Om taritu tarituri swaha, Om taritu tarituri swaha, Om taritu tarituri mama, Ayu punya jnana puktin kuru swaha. Salutations to the mother of the Buddhas, to Tara, to Pragyaparamita, the mother of all wisdom, who grants the triple gem, higher existence, higher knowledge, and eternal happiness. Salutations unto her. Om Sahana Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome here this afternoon to our final class in a series of 3 classes on Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. Last weekend we were not live streaming, though we welcome our live streaming audience today, because we were in retreat, Zen Buddhist retreat. And there we were studying the Dharma, called Zen Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, because SRV associations, where you find yourself today, they're adherents to the great non-dual philosophy of Advaita. Since Sri Ramakrishna was an Advaitin, that makes all of his followers Advaitins. And we feel that Advaita Vedanta is the clarifying agent that you place in the mind, and then it reveals the essence of all religions, because it's not a religion itself, nor is it really merely a philosophy. It's the thread running through the string of pearls, as Sri Krishna calls it in the Gita. And it's that underlying foundation for everything, the substratum, as Lord Kapila called it in the Sankhya philosophy. It is the state of yoga that Patanjali names in Raja Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. And it is also that indivisible reality, which Buddhism calls Tathagatagarbha, or Buddha nature, or as I just chanted, Pragyaparam, the supreme intelligence. So wherever you look, in the three worlds, or in the various religious traditions, or amongst the adherents and followers of Dharma, you will find this underlying tenet or maxim of Advaita Vedanta there, clarifying everything. And so therefore, today we look at Tibetan Buddhism in a third class on the subject under that heading. Sri Ramakrishna once told a story about the substance called alum. Evidently, if you put a bit of alum in a bucket of mixed paint water, then it'll clear it up immediately. So using that analogy, this brackish brown thinking process that many of us are engaged in can be clarified immediately by a little bit of that alum of non-duality. That is, you get that by sitting in holy company. As we were thinking today at satsang early this morning, if some of you were with us after our 6 a.m. meditation, satsangatve nisangatvam, nisangatve nirmohatvam, nirmohatve nishchalitatvam, nishchalitatve jivan muktihi. You get that sense of non-duality from satsang, satsangatve, that is holy company. And that gets rid of your delusion, or it actually gets rid of sense of separation. And then that gets rid of your delusion. Nirmohatvam, you're nirmohat. Nirmoha means free from delusion. And then that gives you jivan mukti, living liberation in this life. So we go to holy company and we take up these deep, intense, subtle, even causal spiritual matters with a mind that has been clarified by right perspective, as the Buddhists would call it. It's one of the Eightfold Path. And then we enter into the field of action, karma shaya, Father of Yoga calls it, and we learn how to negotiate, navigate around the problems in relativity, and steer ourselves on a true course, using the Dharma to that state of enlightenment, which we already are, but which when we enter into the body, we find ourselves sometimes at odds with, or as Vedanta describes it, it's been covered over by sublations, by false superimpositions, or Buddhism says by conditionings. Some 12 different conditionings, links in the chain of rebirth, that all happens because of forgetting our divine nature when we're born. So we need to spend each lifetime in remembrance of our divine nature, and then die consciously from that particular body when it gets old and aged, like in the terms of the 6 billows and the 6 transformations here. Everyone faces those: birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. That's how Vedanta would talk about it on the right-hand side here, 6 transformations: birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. And you see the image of the Buddha, and in this image there, arrows are coming at him, but he's throwing flowers back. So he's impervious to the 6 transformations, because even though the body may get old and decayed, nonetheless he knows his Buddha nature is eternal and stainless and unmoving and all-pervasive. So Vedanta and Buddhism have 2 different ways of saying the same thing. Buddhists call it the 6 billows. You see there: hunger, thirst, grief, delusion, old age, and death. Called the 6 billows. They give us that impression of these coverings, these false superimpositions in the mind that cause us to think other than the way we should be thinking. That is, always dharmically, always in tune with that non-dual axiom, like Ayam Atma Brahma, this self is Brahman, or Prajnanam Brahman, this self is pure intelligence, or Aham Brahmasmi. If you want to cut the chase, I am Brahman. This self is Brahman, I am Brahman. Or if you want to put it in terms of a direct pointer, Tat Tvamasi, that thou art. These are 4 Mahavakyas in the Upanishads of India that many people have picked up even up to the very present age and day and time, even in America. Some people have borrowed those and used them in different permutations. But those are the 4 original Mahavakyas. Maha means great, Vakya means word or saying, utterance. So those 4 great sayings are what occupies the mind of a non-dualist whenever he sees the 6 transformations going on or the 6 billows outside of him. Immediately he would default to those truths, you see. So it depends on generating a good, healthy doubt in everything that's outside of you. That's one of the 3 pillars of Zen that we looked at last week, if you remember, those of you who are at the retreat. It's great doubt is the 3rd pillar. So you have to have a doubt about everything, a good, healthy doubt about what you're seeing, tasting, hearing, touching, smelling, the phenomena that's going on around you, the appearance of the 6 transformations as thousands and thousands of people die every day and are being reborn every day. You have to stand back and take a good, healthy look at that from a detached witness standpoint and develop that great doubt from the standpoint of detachment. Then you can begin to generate this underlying foundation called Advaita and become the great observer. You can also become the great enjoyer, because mere enjoyments fall away as of no interest to you, and you begin to enjoy the process of observation, somewhat like a scientist would when they're looking at matter and atomic particles, but very much more like the spiritual philosopher as he looks at the changing phenomena up against the background of the unchanging reality. So in that way, the 6 transformations are noted. Buddha says about them, even as the strong current of a river sweeps away reeds on its banks, so too does Mara, death, destroy all those with worldly craving again and again. These deluded souls jump from life to life, like a monkey from tree to tree. But whosoever overcomes the billows of relative existence will see their sorrows duly lifted, falling away like drops of water from a lotus leaf. Other great beings even sing about water on lotus leaves. Nalini dalagata chalamati taralam tajvaj jiviti atishaya chapalam vidhivyati abhimanagrastam lokam shokahatam chasamastam. The water on the lotus leaf is very unsteady, Shankara sings. So too is this life unstable. Know that the entire world is smitten with sorrow. So, is that bad news? Is that pessimism? Then why does he sing? Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam Udamate, Samprapte Sanihite Kali, Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukrim Karane. Adore the Lord, adore the Lord, adore the Lord, O you fool. When the time for death and the 6 transformations come, what good will grammatical regulations, rules, conventions, and other things do for you? It will be no good at the time of your death. So the message is very sobering, the music is very happy, and the message is very enlightening. So that's how a person feels when they've seen the underlying substratum of a thing. Then things on the surface don't affect them so much. They'll grieve a little bit like others, the loss of loved ones, and they'll feel compassion for their suffering. But you can't have compassion for the soul because the soul doesn't need compassion. The soul is perfect and pure. You would rather have compassion for that body-mind mechanism that's undergoing suffering temporarily. So these are temporary predicaments, you see. the embodied beings find themselves in. And if you were to follow yoga, you'd find out that these can be transcended even while living. They become much, much less pervasive and much less of an insinuation when you begin to master the prana. We were talking about that this morning. Prana is this energy that's flowing through everything. It's in the river, it's in the wind, it's in the sky, it's in the animals and insects, it's in the body as the 5 functions of the body. And it's in the mind carrying thoughts that carries souls from this body to the next, to the kingdoms of heaven within and back out. Prana. It's a missing link in our understanding in the West. But when you fill it in and begin to watch it, observe it again, and then you begin to master it, then you find that you can get into yoga very soon. And Krishna says in the Gita, let this pain-destroying, suffering-ending philosophy be called by the name of yoga. Yoga will destroy all pain. So a person then finds himself positive in this non-dual atmosphere, this condition of mind, which is Payanabhi single kind of mind, and feels like everything comes and goes and passes like that, like water on a lotus leaf, everything's unstable. But they're settled in that beautiful Lord, you see. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. Adore the Lord, adore the Lord. So from Shankara, or probably should say it the other way, from Buddha to Shankara, from 550 years BC to 700 years AD, over 1,000 years, that idea of transcending the 6 transformations was there. But first you have to acknowledge them, you have to see them. What else does he say about this? Lord Buddha says, renounce all thirst and cravings, master philosophy and terminology, and take your place among the foremost of the sages. Bear this body for the last time. Think, I am the conqueror of all. I am the knower of all. I have relinquished all by the power of the self. I am liberated. So bear this body for the last time, of course, means in ignorance. The bodhisattvas come back again many lifetimes. We were talking about Trungpa Rinpoche today, a current but late Buddhist teacher who was in Denver, Colorado at Naropa Institute, and how he came amongst us and brought the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. And knowledge came out that he had been Dalai Lama's teacher several lifetimes earlier. So that's how much in high regard you could hold somebody like Trungpa Rinpoche if you had any doubts about him. So those bodhisattvas have come again and again many times. So to them, meaning bear this body for the last time means bear this body for the last time in ignorance. Take your vows, your precepts and your vows seriously. Learn the Dharma, learn the philosophies, master the terminology, but first you're going to have to get beyond all thirsts and cravings. They can't have a hold on you anymore. These will become great enjoyments if you can transform them into bond slaves. But if you're a slave to them, then of course your life moves along in difficulties and what they call the accumulation of karmas. So although we've showed this chart of the 6 billows and the 6 transformations many times, I've never really gone into it, figuring that probably you know all of this. It's obvious to you. But it's good to take an in-depth look at it in terms of those 2 quotes from the Dhammapada, Lord Buddha. That's earliest Buddhism, called Hinayana Buddhism. Just a bunch of Lord Buddha's sayings that were gathered together within 100 years or so since after his passing by his 500 arhats. They all got together and gathered all these things that they could remember the Lord Buddha saying, put it into a scripture called the Dhammapada. That was earliest of all Buddhism. Buddhism went through many, many changes, and now 52 generations later, since Buddha was here, it's gone basically from China to Japan, and on the way it's taken trips to Tibet, like we're looking into today, and to Burma and Ceylon and other places, Thailand, and we have examples of teachers from all of these schools of Buddhism in America now amongst us, teaching the Dharma, that Dharma which is India's ancient and eternal gift to us. So 6 billows and 6 transformations, very interesting. I wanted to show, in accordance with that, this chart. Not sure if the live streaming audience will be able to see it, but if so, you can see the 6 billows are listed right here, again, in terms of hunger and thirst. And shoka, grief, Bhranti, delusion, jara, dotage, mrityu, death. I give you the Sanskrit equivalents there. I don't think you got them here too. So I put them in this chart next to the 6 passions. Kama, lust, krodha, anger, lobha, greed, moha, delusion, mada, vanity, and matsarya, jealousy. Amongst these 6 passions are what the Buddhists call the 3 unwholesome roots. The 3 unwholesome roots. So you can see how the traditions overlap each other, how they play off of each other, borrow from each other, and present the teachings in such a way that beings are wakened up to their predicament. Now, above I put some of these 6 transformations you see here on this chart in Vedanta, along with many quotes taken from the Ramayana, the oldest of all avatars, Sri Ram, who still has millions of followers, thousands and thousands of years later. Something must be going on with Sri Ram to have so many wonderful devotees, and there have been so many beautiful songs, Ram Nam, chanted every night in India and so forth. Sita and Ram still hold the hearts of India very dearly, and manifested later as Radha and Krishna, so even more so then. So I took some of Ram's quotes out of the Adhyatma Ramayana, which is the non-dual version of the Ramayana, and put them here under each category. You see under Jayati, birth, he says, beings rush to welcome the birth of a child, overlooking serious factors like delusion and suffering, which may play into embodiment in Maya. Interesting how in the wealth we celebrate birthdays, but we stay away from death days. At least they should be taken on even keel. In other words, conscious life, conscious death, and then conscious rebirth should be where we're leaning after all this time. But you never know what's there in your baby. See, it could be a great seer, or it could be an axe murderer. You don't know what's there. All of that depends on some samskaras in the mind, doesn't it? We'll look at this in a minute, but here's some of these billows. In fact, let's look at it now, because we can come back to this. Here's some of the billows, you see. Only these billows are actual invisible space in the mind. It's like not physical space, not that kind of ether, but a subtler ether where particles of another kind are occupying. See, it's gone subtle. It's gone Anaranian. It's gone to the most subtlemost land, like the kingdoms of heaven within you, Christ said. You've gone inside, and now you find out, if you have been able to go inside, you can actually, just like you observe nature, now you can observe the mind. And this is meditation, basically. Contemplation facilitates that. All of a sudden you can inspect the mind like you could inspect a piece of white paper, Sri Ramakrishna said. Oh, isn't my mind beautiful? Isn't it perfect? And you hold the white paper up to the light and you see all these dark specks in it. So that's the analogy he used for finding out the presence of these ignoble despoilers that rest in the subtle mind. And then you can see them, and until you can see them, you can't get rid of them. So in there you see some of these, what are called samskaras in the human mind. Both Buddhism and Hinduism, Vedanta, talk about samskaras. Don't confuse it with the word samsara. Samsara means millions and billions of souls being born in ignorance and dying in ignorance again and again in rounds, in cyclic rounds. That's samsara. But samskara means a mental impression caused by many, many repetitions of the same act. Like a camel eating thorny bushes. It's one of our favorites, isn't it? From the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Camel eats thorny bushes and its gums bleed. but it's addicted to the taste, so it goes on eating. So when it dies and its camel mind, which isn't very developed by the way, leaves its camel body, then when it goes to its subtle part of its mind, it has this strong desire in the mind for eating more thorny bushes. It never satisfied that desire in its previous existence. So now you know why so many camels are born. And so many elephants and so many cows, and by the way, so many people, because they've got these strong samskaras in the mind for something. Now, there's a positive turn to that teaching. If you have a positive samskara in your mind for the Dharma, for instance, like what Trungpa Rinpoche brought us, or Kala Rinpoche brought us, or Dalai Lama brought us, or Swami Vivekananda brought us, then you have grounds for higher mind. So you can purify that mind outright. In fact, you don't really need to refer to conventional means, lower means. See, you can go right straight to these higher teachings and begin to almost imperceptibly take the imperfections and impurities out of your mind. So in that case, you can see these samskaras here in the human brain. So we're going to have to make a difference between the brain and the mind. We're going to have to know that the brain is a fleshy organ, more like a part of your body, more like a receptor. But inside of the brain, that is in its inmost part, is the mind. It's more a matter of consciousness and intelligence, and the brain is more a matter of surface memory. So if you make a distinction between the human brain and the human mind, then you know what Christ was talking about when you said the kingdom of heaven was within you, because he's talking about the mind when he's talking about the kingdom of heaven within you. Of course, the highest heaven of all would be the Almighty Father, and there's no worlds there. But that doesn't get unwrapped very well in Christendom, I'm afraid. You'd have to go to Vedanta for teachings on the formless. What they call Almighty Father, we call Brahman. Muslims call Allah. And that's, of course, beyond teachings and beyond Dharma. That's why Krishna tells Arjuna in the Gita, you must follow the Dharma, and then you must be ready to go beyond the Dharma to your Swadharma, to your highest destiny. So the teachings, just like camel eats thorny bushes, you might get one of those thorns in your skin, you see. And then you need another thorn to take it out. So you take out the thorn of ignorance with the thorn of knowledge, and when you have them both, you throw them away. See? And then you're fine. You don't need healing anymore. You don't need teachings anymore. Actually, that's what Satsangatve Nisangatvam means. Basically, first you need holy company. Later on, Nisangatve, you don't need holy company. You're fine on your own. But first you have to understand the Dharma. As Sri Ramakrishna put it, you can't whitewash a wall inlaid with mother of pearl. The paint will just run off. So, very cryptic reference there. He's talking about, what he's talking about is the holy don't need holy company. They are holy company. And they can be holy company to themselves. They go inside of their mind and they don't have any of these problems. See, what are some of these problems? Let's look. On the left-hand side of the chart going up, root ignorance, tendency towards cyclic transmigration. That's a very strong possible. What's attended with birth, that is the desire for birth, gender, desire for life or thirst for life, personality, taking on an ego, that would mean death and rebirth again. So those 12 nidanas in Buddhism are talking about 3 lifetime scenarios that are connected by links. But this thirst for life forever quench. Because why? Because it drags from birth to death and death to birth to soul. That's Swami Vivekananda's song of the Sannyasin. This thirst for life forever quench, it drags from birth to death and death to birth to soul. But he conquers all who conquers self. Know this and never yield, he follows up. So this penchant towards cyclic transmigration must be transcended. You must get free of the realm of your ancestors. And Lord Buddha sat some 40 or 50 days under the Bo tree to help us get free of our attachment to the ancestors. Some religions that's all they want. It's just the ancestors. But far beyond the ancestors are the gods and goddesses. Far beyond the gods and goddesses are the Trinity. Far beyond the Trinity is Om, the Word that Christ talked about. And beyond the Word is Brahman, the Almighty Father, the non-dual state of awareness, which is your true self. We call it Atman in Vedanta. Buddha even referred to a self, you see, in the old way of speaking in Buddhism. Later on, they shied away from the word because it too much sounded like ego self, you see, and that's empty. But the true self, Atman, is all pervasive. So that's waiting for you once you transcend this desire for the 6 passions, the 8 fetters, and this transmigration of life. See these 6 desires, you might say, are like the 6 passions, or sort of like the 5 elements. You have a desire for water, you have a desire for lands, you have a desire to breathe, air, you have a desire for fire, for light. So those manifest and the senses get attached to them. And then they want to keep those going, perpetuity. So they want it to go on forever. I want to keep having drinks. I want to keep having and owning lands. I need a solid place to place my feet. But Christ said, birds have nests and foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head here. Why are you wanting to have a solid place to lay your feet? See, let that go. Explore the deeper realms of your consciousness, higher levels of your awareness, and find what the Buddha found, that you can go beyond the ancestors and beyond transmigration. So this root samskara here is very difficult to transcend, as you can see by how many billion people on earth now today? Is it 5 or 6 or 7? And most of those we would be hard put to call enlightened or spiritually free. Spiritual freedom is a rarity. Now, if you go up the left-hand side of this chart, you see the desire for pleasure and power brings them back. You could even reach the realm of the gods, and you'd find the gods have a great desire for power, for domination. And they are dominating over, what to speak of 7 billion, billions and billions of souls, and billions of realms. And these inner realms, these dreamlike realms that are created out of one's own consciousness. Sankalpa, it's called. Mahasankalpa, this great projection of mind at a cosmic level. So they have a great desire for power and for the pleasures that come from being worshipped. That's why they're gods and goddesses. So this is very difficult to transcend too. You can see that it's attended by craving, obsession with personality, the urge to dominate, and identification with body. In this case, subtle body. Don't forget that you have 3 bodies. You have a physical body, you have a mental body, and you have a deep sleep body, a causal body that you go into tonight that's formless. Not very much said about that in the philosophies of any religion, but the causal body, the karana sharira, is the cause for dreaming, and it's the cause for waking. It's the cause for all the other bodies that come out of it. It's the subtlemost of all bodies. And you can equate those with the 3 worlds, the growths, the subtle, and the causal, are just like your 3 states of your awareness, and they match up with the AUM of Om. So if you make these connections, then you have these triputis that just line up with each other. And all of a sudden you see, oh, the cosmological process, I see, and you're a Buddha under the Bo tree, and you're going, oh, I see, I can also see through it. You see. There's this big, huge clock in Calcutta when Sri Ramakrishna was living, and they had fashioned it out of all these gears. And these gears were turning and turning all year, you see. But if you were at that museum where the clock was displayed for 1 hour out of those 360 days of the year, how many? 365 days of the year. If you were there for 1 hour, all the gears would line up and you could see through the clock. But you had to be there that 1 hour to actually be able to see through to the other side of the clock. So Sri Ramakrishna saw that, and he went into samadhi, of course. And a couple hours later, when they got him out of it, he'd come down, you see. He used to hit the top of his head and say, "Come down, Kundalini, come down." So when Kundalini finally came down from that great vision he just saw, they found out that he didn't go into samadhi because of some sort of scientific interest in the clock, but because that personified perfectly that moment in time where the soul sees through everything, puts everything together, and then all of a sudden it lines up. And you have what's called a huge epiphany, or an aha moment. See, like the man in the woods saw a big bear and had a Kodiak moment. So you have this huge epiphany, you see, and you see through Maya. And that's been the whole reason for your existences, all of them up to that point, when you actually get a glimpse of the truth. Thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Well, that's the moment that it happened to Christ in the wilderness. And it also happened to Buddha under the bo tree, Muhammad on the mountain, and so forth and so on. So this all has to do with, you might say, lining up those samskaras, so you can see behind them, see beyond them. So you line them all up and then shift your view about 2% this way, and you can see them line up like your lifetimes. Sri Krishna says in the Gita, at some point in your meditation you'll be able to see all the lifetimes you took. It won't be by personality. It's like, oh, I was the King of England, or I got beheaded somewhere in the Revolution. You see, I was Mary, Queen of Scots. The way the Westerners think about rebirth. You don't actually see the personality, but you see the line of. The point is that you were always awareness. You never were any of the bodies that you took. So you see the string of awareness, and that clarifies all the births you took. And so that's a bit different than you would hear maybe the Westerners interpret rebirth at a New Age party or something. You actually are aware of awareness at that point. So it's that great epiphany that sees through everything. Well, here's a little samskara skanda here. Samskara is an impression in your mind, and it can be very cloudy. It can also be very revealing. We'll see those soon. But a samskara skanda, Sri Ramakrishna says, is like a bunch of little bubbles collecting around a big bubble. If the big bubble pops, all the little ones will get dispersed. So you can see that around a billow like this, see, there are things like covetousness, anger, lust, hatred. That's where these six passions and 8 fetters come in. These are all passions, and here's the 8 fetters here. What things like hatred, lineage, that is pride in lineage, fear, bhaya, varna, caste, shame, pride, secrecy, and grief. Those are called the 8 fetters. So the 6 passions and the 8 fetters, you always hear them mentioned in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and places like that. So I decided I would find out what they were and write them down for everyone so you could know what it is you're up against. These are the little bubbles of the samskara, called the samskara skanda, and when they get together, it's very difficult to get to the root samskara. See what I'm saying here? Is that you have a root samskara around rebirth or around dominance or power or pleasure, and it's something that you want to see through and destroy so you can be free, yet you haven't even got to that yet because of this collection of samskaras, little ones, that are gathered around it. So people can't get rid of their lust or their anger or their fear or their envy or their pride or their shame. So they can't get to the root samskara. They haven't even begun the spiritual work yet. So that's what clings to you in the case of a samskara skanda. And so back to this chart, you could see then it starts to get more toward a mixed samskara when you find your way into higher life. That is, you haven't found the Dharma yet. You're still operating under the premise of the ego, but you can see there that things are beginning to shift. That is, the things that you're really working against there are the sense of agency. I do my work. There's a beautiful song actually about that Sri Ramakrishna used to love to sing, that takes in everything about suffering and also about freedom. Shakale tomaricha icha mai taratumi tomar karma tumi karma loke bale loke kare arihami. He goes on to say, Panke bar kara kari pangure langao giri kare doma brahma pada kare kara adogami. It's basically this beautiful sentiment that this songwriter is trying to express, is that all happens by Mother's own sweet will. And all work belongs to her, but others call it their own. So that's that sense of agency that comes in, you see. It's very strong in people. And as long as it persists, then this idea that it's my work, it's my life, it's my possessions, and it's my wealth persists in them. And this attachment to wealth, seeking it, gaining it, guarding it, and the fear of losing it, is how the ancient Sanskritists put it, Lord Kapila precisely. There are 4 different levels to wealth, not just seeking it, but then you have to gain it, you have to, you want to enjoy it, and then you want to protect it, and then you fear losing it. So there are 4 or 5 different levels to just the problem of a little samskaric bubble of wealth, you see. Lust for wealth. So in that regard, then, things are beginning to get a little defined in the person who's beginning to enter into the realm of mixed samskaras. It's not all bad now, it's not all negative. Some little light or glimmerings are coming through. He goes on here to say, you cause the elephant to get stuck in the mire, but you cause the lame man to scale the highest mountain. On some you bestow the highest happiness, others you hurl into the realm of suffering. So, who can understand the dictates of the divine will? You see, nobody can understand them. So, therefore, I stay close to Mother. You see, but the way he puts it here is, I'm the machine and you are its operator. I'm the chariot, you are the charioteer. I'm the house and you're the indweller. I move as you move me. I think as you think through me. So he tends to take a position as close to God as he can get in order to escape these difficulties. Now, if you move around, here's a dictionary rendering of samskara. You won't find it in the English dictionary. Don't try looking there. But if it were there, this is what it would say. A mental impression formed via desire-based actions with the propensity for causing rebirth. If you want to put it in a one-sentence nutshell, and you can define that very inscrutable word called samskara and how it connects to your rebirth process. I mean, it's not just that people are just born randomly. See, and some people are lucky and some people are unlucky. That's a fairy tale way of thinking. That's childish. Everything is very well directed by karma, and you reap what you sow and you sow what you reap. So in that way, somebody who wants to inspect the nature of things, they want to inspect the nature of their mind, as we were just saying, they're going to look for traces of samskaric residue. They're going to see what's in my head that's causing me to be born in the way I am, causing me the way I speak as I do, causing me the way to think as I do, and I act. And then they're going to make corrections once they find those samskaras. Samskaras can be done away with by spiritual practice, by sadhana, we call it in Sanskrit. Sadhana means meditation, study of scriptures, devotions, chanting, mala, that is japa, recitation of the Lord's name. These things done very deeply and intensely can do away with some scars, and then you can be free. Now, let's look at toward the positive samskaras. Here you see energy, morality, proper orientation, and altruism. Oh, now we're beginning to see a little light at the end of the tunnel. You have some good energy. You're becoming aware of your prana. You see, now I can live. I can live a higher life. I don't have a thirst for life. I'm not dependent on prana that wanes and waxes, but I can actually develop good eating habits and get good, healthy prana from my food. Take it up the spine, see, and then get Kundalini interested in me. Oh, Mother, will you get interested in me? Will you rise up the spine? Not that far, Mother. Come back down. Come back down. See, she goes too far up, then you lose complete sight of the world. Then you can see then that a person becomes ethical and moral, and they have that very important qualification called right orientation. That starts off the Buddha's teachings about the Eightfold Path. You know the Four Noble Truths, right? There is suffering. There is a cause for suffering. There's a way out of suffering, and that way out of suffering is called the Ashtangika Marga. Ashtanga means 8, like the 8-limbed yoga, and Marga means path. So the Eightfold Path is there, and right at the top of that is right orientation. You have to start out with the right perspective. So many people dive into spiritual life, or try to, before they have their path clear in their mind. See, and then it's just all random and taking a chance. And rebirth comes that way too. We have random births, random deaths, supposedly so. So right perspective is like qualification. It will set you up for the right path, and you won't go off the straight and narrow, as they say. Too many detours, too many dead ends. So in that way, this proper orientation shows itself up right away in your samskaras. Oh, I see where I made that mistake. I see where I made that wrong turn. Hopefully you'll realize that before you're 80 years old. See? Because that's what happens to a lot of people when they get very old. They'll say, I would have done it different, or I have regrets. You'll hear those kinds of mantras being said. Those aren't good mantras to have. Why me is the mantra that follows. Instead of saying, who am I, you're saying, why me? So altruism is also a good start, you see, because then you're starting to think a little bit of others and less of yourself. Basically, that's how I would define altruism. It's not selfless service yet, because there's money involved, there's pride in works still lingering. You see, the agency is still carrying over there. You want to be a great savior of the world, you want to cure cancer, you want to do this and that, you want your name on that constellation, you want to be a great discovery. You want to navigate the 7 seas. So you've still got this strong sense of agency in you. It's just beginning to be a little tempered here. And then you begin to think a little bit more of others and less of yourself. So it needs to turn, actions, merits, and deeds need to turn more positive. Towards what? Towards this samskara, which you see in some people. They have great aptitude for learning. They have higher learning, in fact. They have a great samskara for positivity. You see, some people are just impossible to get down. They're always resilient. They stand up, and they're straightforward in their thinking and their path. And they've developed religious faith, finally. That's not necessarily present here in altruism or in any of these other areas, because religion is itself a problem, a samskaric problem. It's called conventional religion, and it's ceased to live. It's ceased to have any pranic energy in it. It's beginning to lag, and its doctrines are beginning to become dogmatic and full of lassitude, you see. And then it's religion with a small r, Vivekananda called it. He wanted to bring back religion with a capital R, so religious faith begins to get developed here when mental capacity and intelligence visits. pragyaparam, that higher intelligence. Buddha named himself after it, or that's what he's called. You might as well say the Buddha, we might as well say the great intelligence, the perfectly refined intelligence. Now as you move further into it, then you get a person who's into selfless service. Now we must declare in Vedanta that it's a far sight deeper and further on than altruism is. That desire to serve God and human beings is what it is. It's not serving human beings anymore because they are God, they just don't know it yet. So you have to serve God in them so that they will become aware that God is in them. If you serve them as humans, they tend to stay human. If you serve them as God, they begin to realize their divine nature. So that's a beautiful realization that Swami Vivekananda has brought out. So in that way, you begin to see God and other beings and bring it out of them, and that's selfless service. Then wisdom, not just higher learning, but actual wisdom. You might say this was the beginning of Dharma, and this was Jnanam, Atma-Jnanam, wisdom of the true self and its nature. Compassion, always one of the later things to arrive on the scene in most people, because you can serve people, but to have compassion for them too is a step. Peace of mind comes, which is, everyone covets that. Whether they know it or not, they're all looking for peace. And some of them are just trying to approach it through restlessness, and it's not going to happen. And illumination finally dawns. So you can see these are abilities for divine life and for conscious embodiment. Now, just quickly about conscious embodiment, we looked at this in our last class 2 weekends ago, but I didn't have a printout of it then. So here I show you what a conscious life is really about. What is the palette of conscious future lives? That is, if you were going to paint, if you were an artist, a spiritual artist, and you had a canvas and you had a paintbrush, and you say, here's my next life, and you started painting it, what would be there if you were, according to the seers and the bodhisattvas, who are past masters at this? They've died consciously and they've been reborn consciously many times, and they know their chain of births, and they haven't been attached to them either. So what would be there is attaining your first liberation. Now, the same way you can make a distinction between brain and mind, you can make that distinction between salvation and liberation. Salvation is something you get through a savior. Liberation is something you get through an exemplar. So in India, the avatars are exemplars, not saviors. And there's a subtle distinction there that's worth looking at, worth meditating upon. On the eastern horizon, the avatar is an exemplar, but on the west he's looked at as a savior. So the idea that Christ came and died for your sins and shed his blood for you, Vivekananda found that untenable. He didn't like that idea, and he said so when he came here. He said, nobody's going to die for me and shed their blood for me. I'll do that for myself, thank you. I'll suffer my own transgressions, because that's the only way I'm going to get free. So he was averse to that idea. But if you look at Christ with the right perspective again, right orientation, which is so important, we were saying, then you'll see that he's really an exemplar. He wants you to be perfect like the Father in heaven is perfect. And he said so on many different occasions in many different ways. Grant unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but take unto yourself what is the Lord's. You are a devotee. You are a lover of God. You're not a worldly person. Part company. Forget the 7-day creation theory and begin thinking in terms of an eternal life. Eternal life is one of his favorite subjects to speak to the fishermen. You've got bread, you have loaves, you have fishes, you have wives, you have nets, you have rivers. I want to show you something that you're missing. You're set up perfectly, just like this sets you up perfectly, right? These samskaras. You have a samskara to be a fisherman, you have a samskara to live a harmonious life, you have a samskara to be non-violent, and you're a good person, a good moral person, but it's setting you up for something far beyond morality and ethics. And so that is what your swadharma means, not just your dharma, but your higher destiny, is always waiting there, just out of your reach, it seems. So you want to attain that first pinnacle of realization called Jivan Mukta. That is what we just sang about. Sat sangat ve nisangatvam, nisangat ve nirmohatvam, nirmohat ve nishchalitatvam, nishchalitatvam jivan mukti, the last word of the verse. Through freedom from delusion, you get resolve, nishchaya. And from that resolve, you get freedom in this lifetime. You live your first free lifetime. You have your first conscious death, see. So when you do that, you can select the country and culture of your choice. It's not random anymore. And maybe you can even begin to see why you chose the particular culture that you chose when you were born. Japanese, Caucasian, Oriental, Occidental. Was it accidental? It was probably a matter of your own choosing, because according to Sri Krishna in the Gita, God has nothing to do with it. It's all karma and nature that's going on. God does not create the fruits of desire and the objects and the coming together of them. Nature does all that in conjunction with your mind. So that's your business. So in that way, you should start thinking about this conscious death that you want to die this time. Hopefully, study the Dharma early. Because the Tibetans say that a lot. We looked at that 2-3 weeks ago in the first class, under the chart of the bardos states, if you remember, that Janggang Khantrul Rinpoche said that it's good if you can hear the Dharma at the time of death. If you just happen to have a spare Rinpoche somewhere, say, come to my house, I'm dying, see, and you can lead me like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But who has a spare Rinpoche in their pocket, you see, nearby? And who knows when they're going to die. So he says, that's good if you can hear that at the time of death. Better if you have studied the Dharma during your life, because then you can guide yourself through this process of death without giving way to fear and panic. Because that's the two things that throw people unconscious when they go to death. Fear and panic. Because the sense of taste is withdrawing from water, and the sense of smell is withdrawing from earth. See? And the sense of sight is withdrawing from sunlight. And the sense of hearing is withdrawing from ether. Buddha called these your six desires, your 5 desires. You desire earth, you desire water, you desire air and fire, and you desire ether. And so you got attached to them, and you produced them. Now you have to withdraw from them against your will. See? But you don't know what's waiting for you beyond the 5 elements and beyond the 5 senses. So practice the Dharma and practice meditation in this life so you'll find out what's in your subtle body. Because your subtle body, that's where you're going after death. You're not going to oblivion or hell. You're going into your subtle body. Your subtle body contains your ancestors, it contains the elementals, it contains lower heaven and higher heaven. And you want to know what's up when you go there. It's just like, going to Spain or going to France. Going to a different country, so you have to know the language, you have to know the direction. So it's the same giving up the body. You're going into the kingdoms of heaven within you. You drop the physical body, so you want to do that consciously. So this is the idea of somebody painting on their canvas what's going to happen when they get free. So select the country and culture of your choice. You can assume gender and physical body of your choice. There's not going to be any confusion whether I'm male or female, changing horses in the middle of the stream later, or trying to be both or neither. You just choose one and you live a dharmic life. And that's up to you to choose. Spiritual practice and attainment in previous lives is going to be a necessity. Choosing dharmic parents prior to entering the womb. If you're coming to America, good luck. If you looked at your parents from outside the womb in this lifetime, before you came to American soil and became an American, then you probably didn't find any dharmic parents there if you even knew what they were. You found maybe a few moral parents and ethical parents, or a few wealthy parents, because wealth is important to the reincarnation process. It can also be a great detriment. So you want to have parents that will teach you the Dharma, because you can learn a little Dharma in this lifetime. The next lifetime, you can be born with parents that don't know it, and they guide you in a different direction towards gaining wealth, hoarding wealth, enjoying wealth, maintaining wealth, and being fearful of losing wealth. That's the direction you could be headed with this set of parents, you see, because they think that's the way you should be living. That's life to them. They don't know any better. They don't know that that's Maya, not Dharma. Dharma makes you free. Maya gets you embroiled in suffering. That's why suffering is there, you see. So choose dharmic parents and arrange your life circumstances in order to neutralize any further karma you have. If you don't have any karma, then you're probably not coming back. So if you have no karma, then just get up and leave. See, right now. Go on, get out of here, I mean it. See? But if you still have karmas and you still have a body, then you have your prarabdha karma to deal with still, then listen closely, because you can live a life that is dharmic and destructive of karma. You can get free of that. Vivekananda and others were so bold as to say, there's no God here. The God here is karma. So you might as well pay obeisance to that God of karma and begin finding out how to neutralize and please him, you see. God is not in form, but karma is all about form. So that's what you're going to have to clear up here. That's that drop of alum you're going to put into that muddy water. Also experience compassion, experience a conscious death at the end of the last lifetime, right there. That's one of the things you have a choice to do. I won't let death catch me off guard. I'll be prepared for that. In fact, how do I prepare for it? Tomorrow morning's meditation, I die. In Zen, the Roshi will ask you in private meeting, have you died on your Zafu yet? Have you died on your Zafu? Have you had that experience where the ego went away and you had that clarifying moment? See, that's what Zazen is reaching for. That's the penultimate ideal of Zazen. And so you must set yourself up for that. You see, arrange your meditation so that you're affording yourself the luxury of dying on your cushion tomorrow morning. And just watch what comes back. What leaves and what comes back. Observe. And you'll be able to define those subtle parts of your subtle body, you see, and you'll be able to master them that way. Now you know why you think the way you do and what's going on and what's going to happen. Most likely what's going to happen, and you can either avoid it or bring it about. So very important to experience a conscious death at the end of this lifetime. That'll get you into Jivan Mukta. Also, setting up the manifestation of one's work and mission in life. You can really think about serving others in a very deep way if you have died a conscious death and you have a conscious rebirth. Before you get into that next body, then you can really set up your work and your mission to reach fruition. And you'll get rid of that sense of agency then in you, and you'll be on a mission from God. As the Blues Brothers said so nicely. So be on a mission from God. Now, sincere compassion to help all beings gain spiritual emancipation. I mean, that's pretty much the main vow of the Bodhisattva, isn't it? I will help all sentient beings get free of suffering. That means unnecessary suffering, by the way, because these are necessary sufferings. You can't get rid of those as long as you're in a body. So that should be clarified, that when the Buddhists say, we're going to get rid of your suffering, they mean your unnecessary suffering. that which is standing in the way to freedom. But if you take on a body, everyone from avatar to ant who is in a form has to suffer those 6. That's necessary suffering. That's something you can't do away with as long as you're embodied. The final canvas there, non-dual perspective that transforms all appearances into reality. You want that non-dual perspective, which is what I started out talking about today at class. If you can have that during your life, at the time of your death, and be born with it in the next lifetime, then all the rest of this pretty much will fall into order. If you've gained the secret of non-duality, basically that means I'm a birthless, deathless soul, and that all transformation is non-actual. That's what freedom amounts to. You know that you're never born and you never die, and number 2, everything that transforms is not reality. It's Maya. You make the distinction and then you withdraw yourself from Maya. You separate the wheat from the chaff. It's this old law written in stone and spiritual foundation of everything. So India has been very clear about that. 2 axioms of non-duality are non-transformation and non-birth and non-death. That's what you take with you when you die this lifetime, and when you come back, you bring it with you. And all the rest of this will be added unto thee in natural course of time. Now, to explain this process in a very simple way, let's look at Sri Ramakrishna's story. He says, the potter puts his pots in the sun to dry, both the baked and the unbaked ones. A cow happens to walk over them and breaks some of them. The baked pot shards that are broken he throws away, but the soft ones, though broken, he gathers them up and shapes them into a lump. From this lump he forms new pots. In the same way, as long as a man does not realize God, he will have to come back to this earth, to the potter's hands. So Sri Ramakrishna in a village, Jairambati, Kamarpakur, looking at his hut, sees the man the potter putting up his pots. Cow walks over them, breaks the baked ones to shards, and steps on the soft ones, and he gathers up those, keeps them, puts them into a mold, reforms new pots. So that simple village experience, to Ramakrishna's mind, is exactly what happens to a man who is not baked in the fire of knowledge, in the kiln of knowledge. He hasn't been baked there, so when his body breaks, when the cow of holiness walks over his body and breaks it, he will not come back again. He gets thrown away. He's not used for the next creation. There's another cycle of creation coming up, you might have noticed. Always. That's eternal too. So you want yourself baked in the fire of knowledge, like a pot, so that you won't have to return to the body again, and that means in ignorance. Because, as to finish up this chart, Holy Mother says, human being, today it is, tomorrow it is not. No one will accompany a person after death. Only actions, good and bad, follow, even after death. The result of karma is inevitable. But karma's effects can be counteracted greatly by japa and meditation. So get your beads out, everyone. Learn to do the repetition of God's name, because that attenuates karma. I have a brand new chart on that called The Inner Meaning of the Mala, and another chart called The Meaning of the Gayatri. Those will help you. Each of your beads has a designation. Like one of the beads is the churner of the ocean of wisdom. Another bead is to Ganesha, to do away with spiritual impediments. So all the beads have a designation on your whole mala, so as you're turning them. So japa, she says, one of the great practices of all religions, repeating the Lord's name with a mantra that's been given you by an illumined teacher, an acharya. One more quote, and this chart will have been done completely. ego plus mind plus intelligence, and adding in the five senses make up this temporal unit called the psychophysical being. When considering it and its powers, we must remember that when these 8 facets are kept in a pure state, then Kundalini Shakti loves to sport in this amazing form. That's the beauty of a conscious lifetime. Mother herself will take over the body, like the song we just sang. Oh Mother, you cause all to happen by your own sweet will. So that's a lover of divine reality. The 5 senses get pure, the mind gets pure, the intellect gets refined, and that's called the eightfold body. It's a teaching about the psychophysical being that goes back as far as Krishna. He called it the Puryastaka body. Puryastaka body. Even before Krishna, Vasishta was teaching it. I have a chart on it. Eightfold body and what it signifies. Later it became 24 cosmic principles, and the Shaivites took it and made it 36 cosmic principles, expanded it. But in the beginning it was just this 5 senses and threefold mind. And one was the physical body and the other was your subtle body. And if you knew that before you died, then when you get outside the body, you could form another one. See, if you don't know it, then it's all disconnected. You don't know that taste goes with water, and sight goes with light, and earth goes with smell, and feeling goes with air, and hearing goes with ether. It's all disconnected, you see. So when you're outside the body, you have no idea what's being formulated, who's doing the formulating, and who's going to have to suffer the karma. That's you. See, you're doing it all. No God can help you, no devil can keep you from it. God and devil are in you. Get rid of them both. And be your true nature. That's what Buddha did under the Bo tree. Get rid of all concepts and live an eternal life. So this is how a palette of conscious future lives would get painted by the consummate artist. This is what you're looking for in spiritual life. If you say, well, there's worldly life, there's evil life, there's intellectual life, there's scholastic life, there's philosophical life, intellectual life, and there's religious life. What is this thing called spirituality? Is it a pipe dream of someone? This is what spirituality wants to lead you to. Mastery over your true nature, realization of your true nature. And when that happens, then you can live a conscious existence every time. You could even come back 1,000 times, as Vivekananda said. I will come back 1,000 times if I can even help one person get free. That's how serious his vow is. Of course, he's probably going to take about 700 years rest every time. You don't see a soul like that very often on earth. But 700 years is nothing. Holy Mother, whose quote is here, said about him, oh, Vivekananda, Naran, he sits in meditation for 700 years at a time outside the body, like a wooden statue. So great souls know about that soul. We don't know what we had in Vivekananda and how lucky and fortunate we were to have him here in America yet, of all places. But we'll find out. So this whole worthwhile connection came out of this. Speaking about connections, came out of talking about birth, didn't it? Beings rush to welcome the birth of a child, overlooking serious factors like delusion and suffering which play into embodiment in Maya. So I've tried to present it in terms of a conscious birth palette that you can paint, but you have to also look on the other side of things. There are many people, Vivekananda said, this is a quote of his actually, you don't understand. Just as many people are born to suffer as to enjoy. And actually, suffering is a better path to follow than enjoyment. Enjoyment you'll never get out of for a long time, suffering will chase you out of embodiment. Unless you're a spiritual hypochondriac or something. Something very wrong with you. But most people want to get out of suffering. The open doorway to them, the problem is pleasure is the way out of suffering. But the seers come forward and tell you that's a circle you're in. You enjoy for a while, then you suffer, and then you enjoy some more and you suffer. And that might as well just be a miniature version of of samsara. Samsara based on thousands and thousands of samskaras in the minds of billions of people. Well, I'm almost reticent to go into another one because it might take us to 2 more charts, but let's try it. Birth and growth. Growth is the second of the transformations, right? Birth and growth. Asti. The illusion of growth is one of the Mayic elements which attaches men and women to the ever-changing realm of name and form. The great acharyas of India and the great dharmic souls, householders, some of them were rishis, were householders. They gave us the Upanishads. Many of them were householders. So when they taught their children, they taught them, you're not growing. The soul doesn't grow. You can't create a soul, and you can't make it grow, and you can't kill it. Did you forget that non-dual truth I just told you? My dear, you've already forgotten it. You're asking me to measure your height, measure you on a wall. That's an appearance. That's your body growing, and that might as well be a shadow. I mean, think about it. They say that a soul gets created out of dust. That has to be metaphoric. You cannot take that literally. In the Bible, you're taking too many of the right things metaphorically, you see, and too many of the wrong things literally. You got to switch that around. You can't create a soul. A soul was never created, for one thing. It always is. It is the nature of existence. Funny that asti is actually a word for existence. Asti, bhati, priya, right? There are 2 great words in India. One, Satchidananda, pure existence, pure knowledge, pure bliss. You've probably heard that word. But the old version of that was Asti Bhati Priya. That was existence. Bhati means light, and Priya means what is most dear. And so if you put them side by side, you can see what is most dear gives you bliss. That is Priya and Ananda, right? Well, the same is true of Asti and Sat. It's pure existence. So Ram is using it in the most ancient way when he says Asti. It has to do with growth, the illusion of growth. So I bring that teaching to bear to you. You cannot create a soul. You cannot get something out of nothing. It's something already, and it always was something. It was pure existence. It's ridiculous to think that you can actually create a soul. God wouldn't even do it. So then the other thing is that you won't be able to kill that soul because it's eternal. It's one of the few words in English that, at least that we have to explain something, the word eternal. Read my lips. See, if something's eternal, it's changeless. See, that is, all changes going on inside of it are just machinations. They're sleight of hand. They're Mayic aberrations. But the thing itself is just itself all the time. Changeless, birthless, deathless, timeless, spaceless, and so forth. So, don't fall into this Mayic illusion, the ever-changing realm of name and form. About Vardhate, disease, is next, I think. Sri Ram says, outside, in the relative world, there are diseases which, though they may have their origin in the subtle mind, manifest harshly in the body. Vashishta was alive at the time of Sri Ram. We know that because Vashishta counseled Ram when he was a teenager. That's called Yoga Vashishta. I've put out a version of that scripture myself because I feel it's so important. So Ram was a young teenager when he had his Buddha-like experience of going out of the castle. Both of them, thousands of years apart, had the same exact experience. They might as well be the same being. Ram left to castle of King Sakya, the Sakya Muni, right, he's called, the Muni of the Sakya line, the Sakya kings. So he left that castle, Buddha, and then Ram left the castle of the King Dasaratha. See? And so those were thousands of years apart. And when they left the castle, they had the same experience. They were very unhappy when they got back. Buddha described it as seeing the four signs: old man, diseased man, dying man, dead corpse, and a monk. So that's how he dealt with it. Ram came back and was silent for days. Nobody could talk with him. This youth, this young, bright, shining lad, had seen the misery outside of his father's castle and had got his first glimpse of suffering, see, in all its full force. So Vasishtha was alive at the time of Ram. So this is why Ram is saying, diseases manifest in the mind first. They come from the mind. The source of disease is the mind. And then they'll manifest later in the body as cancer and so forth and so on. So there's another reason why you need to inspect your mind before you project a body. If you project a body under the auspice of these diseases, then that body is going to get diseases in that lifetime. But if you've mastered those diseases in your mind, and they're not a part of your projection process, then you won't have those diseases when you live. And that's why some people get diseases and some don't. That's why the yogis are almost always healthy. Hardly ever get a cold. And when they do, they say, I didn't get a cold, my body got the cold. So they have the right perspective all the time. So there are teachings inside of teachings in these quotes, but this pretty much states the nature of disease right there and gives you something to think about. Finally, jara, old age. He says, set upon by old age, a man is hardly even able to contemplate the soul's passage to higher worlds, much less meditate upon reality. That's a very good double-edged sword there. I mean, it'd be nice to be able to contemplate conscious birth and conscious death. If you're doing that, you still haven't realized Brahman. You still haven't got samadhi. You're going from birth to death and death to birth. You're just a more conscious soul than the rest of them. But that man can't even do that when old age sets in on him. What to speak of meditating on reality? See, so that's the real predicament. The real predicament, as bad as it is, isn't coming and going with karmic baggage. The real predicament is that you never saw Brahman. That's why Shankara sings in that very same song. When I was a baby, I was attached to my mother's breast. When I was a young boy, I was attached to sport. When I was a young man, I was attached to a young woman. When I was old, I was attached to anxiety. But to the Supreme Brahman, alas, I was never attached. See? It's one of the more poignant verses of that Bhaja Govindam song. See? So that's the real bad news, is that you never saw your true, blissful, birthless, deathless nature. That you are coming and going on all the time, that's just secondary problem. Kshara, decay, is the sixth of these transformations. Ram says, with the life force literally squeezed out of the various human vessels, then comes the collapse and dissolution of the human frame into dust. Imagine those people who think they're the body, and what kind of agony and fear and confusion attends them when the body begins to die. This very same Shankara that I was just mentioning, who wrote this song Bhaja Govindam, they asked him once, what is the most amazing thing? See, there's a scripture he wrote called 1,000 Questions. Rosary of 1,000 Questions. And one of them, his students asked him, what's the most amazing thing you ever saw? And he said, the most amazing thing I ever saw was that though a man has death all around him, he never thinks that he's going to die. He sees others dying like flies everywhere. his grandparents, other people, he reads about it in the paper, hears about it. But he never thinks he's going to die. So that's what Shankara, this great enlightened soul who was enlightened at the age of 12 and passed away at the age of 32, said about this phenomena that most surprised him. So here we have somewhat of the same thing. Life squeezed out of the old vessels, then the soul's passage to higher worlds, much less meditate on reality. But then when life force is literally squeezed out of these vessels, it comes and collapses, and the dissolution of the human form ends in dust. Holy Mother said about the body, Sri Sharda Devi, what's all this talk about the human body? It only ends up as a few pounds of dust in the end. It's all this problem, all this hubbub about it, you see. So you should be thinking about eternal life. And if you do, then the body's passing. There's no problem for you. You can let it go. Krishna said, child puts on clothes, outgrows them, takes them off, throws them away, and puts on another set of newer clothes. That's all that's happening. And even that's suspect. Even that's suspect. Because we know matter and energy get converted, don't we now, because of science? Is there any death going on out there? So the mind's attachment to decay, the suffering it feels as it gets diseased and so forth, that's really the problem, isn't it? If we could somehow draw our mind away from that process and know it to be unreal, then we ourselves would not suffer when we go through these things. You think that's just hopeful thinking, but Sri Ramakrishna had cancer of the throat. And when they asked him, do you feel that? He said, only when I talk to you. Because I have to come down to lower centers and see you and talk to you. But when you're gone, my mind will go right back up to the feet of Mother Kali, and I won't feel this. So it's not impractical, see, or impossible you shouldn't think of it that way. It's wherever you put your mind is where your mind will go. And if you have mastery over the mind, then take it off your toothache. Do an experiment. Take it off your toothache. Take it off your headache. You know that you have a headache, and then you start doing something and you have that headache, but you're not aware of your headache when you're doing something. And you stop doing it, oh, I have a headache, see. So for periods of time you were not experiencing that. Your mind had the capacity to go away from its suffering. So one can reach a high level of withdrawal, or we call detachment, vairagyam. Finally, and then we'll take a break, Mara, or death, comes. The grim reaper, Yama, moves among the young and the aged alike, gathering heads like a farmer picking ripe melons during a seasonal harvest. And old gray ripe heads, you see, farmer comes along, Yama, and harvests them. So, but as the teachings say, there's much more to death than mrityu. Mrityu is Yama, pretty much. It's the natural function of death. But what's really at the foundation of the cause of death is ignorance of your true nature. Not knowing that you never die, because you were never born. And so there's much more to death than just this dropping of the body, mrityu. Mrityunjaya, there's a mantra called Mrityunjaya, means victory over death. So you recite this, and you get the idea that you can get victory over death. Now, in the remaining minute or so, let's do the final quote down here. Preoccupation with relative existence is to be transcended. When impeding factors such as the 6 transformations, the 6 passions, the 6 billows, and the 8 fetters, and the 3 gunas, and the pairs of opposites verily besiege mankind at every step, all of them attended by constant change and pervasive suffering, how desirable can this life be? In other words, when these are your playmates at recess, how desirable can this embodied life be? And that is why Kamalakanta likes to sing about that. He says, Yakan yeman vidirlikan she rupetame shebin Yakan yeman vidirlikan she rupeshabe chedin Babile bishad gotibe pramad Babile bishad gotibe pramad Kalina bori bijedin shukir Vashana karo arkadim Shukir Vashana karo arkadim. He says, "O friend, how long will you cling to this empty desire for earthly happiness? Misery and misfortune will come if you cling. But when it comes, remember Mother Kali. Whatever happens, know it all to be her will and surrender yourself completely. Don't forget the 9 months of 9 months of suffering in your mother's womb. How painful it was to get formed in the mother's womb. Don't forget that. And cling to the mother's feet. Sing Ma, Ma, Ma. And then paddle your body, the boat of your body up and down, see, in ecstasy, up and down, with the ebb and the flow of the tide of time. There's beautiful songs that they sing in India about this. So let's take a break here, digest some of this, and come back for some more teachings with references to both Advaita Vedanta and Tibetan Buddhism. in the second half of our class today, and this being the third in a series of 3 classes that we've taken on Tibetan Buddhism under the Advaitic telescope, if you might say, or magnifying glass, to observe some of the deeper teachings and how they have connect with the roots of Mother India. We are going to look at this third in a series of major charts in Tibetan Buddhism that I've crafted from my past experience in Tibetan Buddhism, because I was initiated into the white and green Tara both by Karmapa and the previous Karmapa. And so took a great interest in Mother of Wisdom, Mother of the Buddhas, in the same way that I'd started out with my root path was Mother Kali and Sri Ramakrishna, Mother of the Tantras, if you want to put it that way. And the whole Vedanta that was brought here by Swami Vivekananda in 1893. Interesting that Sakya Soin, I think his name was the first Roshi, Zen Roshi, to bring Zen to America, and brought it at the same time, 1893, at the Parliament of Religion. So Zen had its real beginning in America. At the same time, Vivekananda was making his big stir with Vedanta and bringing it to the West. So those, you might say, that was 2 arms that reached around the world, and gathered back together right in Chicago at 1893 at the Parliament of Religions. So historically speaking, it's very symbolic and apropos too when we look at it, beyond coincidence, as you might want to say that. So the first chart I showed you that was the major one was the bardo states, and the word bardo being somewhat like our word loka in Sanskrit and Vedanta, bardo having more of a reference towards periods of times that pass, like say the bardo of high school, or the bardo of dying, or the bardo of after death, before the next birth. Those are bardos, periods of time in which there's some sort of transformation, transmigration going on. So that was the first chart we looked at 3 weeks ago, and then 2 weeks ago we looked at the Mahamudra, the Great Seal, if you remember, the view, the path, and the action, the really wonderful way in which the Tibetans look at non-duality via that tradition. So we looked at that 2 weeks ago, and then last week we had a week off from live streaming and SRV classes to do that Zen retreat. And here then, to bring full circle in this series of 3 Tibetan classes, is that I wanted to show you this chart called Precepts, Points, Practice, and Process. Of course, the Tibetan path, the Vajrayana, the crest jewel, the diamond jewel, as compared to or contrasted with Hinayana, Mahayana, and so forth. So this Vajrayana, a very specific path, had its own evolution and its own growth and maturation in Tibet. And so we've been talking a lot about suffering and passions and fetters and the 6 transformations and so forth. We should probably depart from that and see some of the solutions and remedies, spiritually speaking, that are offered against those insinuations, what Patanjali would call the despoilers, or the viparyayas, the antaryayas. There's a lot of Sanskrit words for this insinuations of kleshas, for instance. That's common to both Vedanta and Buddhism. Patanjali, the father of yoga, would call it the 6 kleshas. In Buddhism they would have kileshas. So same word really in Pali and in Sanskrit, but those are the problems of, or five kleshas, I guess. They have egotism and attachment, aversion, and clinging to life, and ignorance of your true nature are the kleshas. So there's a lot of talk about that, and then when you come to practice the Dharma, that's another step. You want to hear about the Dharma first, shruti, hear it first, and then manana, roll it over in your mind and practice it. That's coming full circle. So this chart is designed to show how Tibetans would enter into this path. And they would do it by Buddhist precepts, which are pretty famous to most of us. Certain points they want you to concentrate on, the actual practice itself and how to undergo it, and the process of what you should expect when you engage in this practice. So it's very well thought. So let's look into this. Do we have it on the screen for the live streaming audience can see it too? Number one there is, of these four, is Guru Yoga and empowerment. Guru Yoga has been called a rather risky and dangerous path. We can see why when it came to the West, and the gullible Westerners took it up and began to get taken in by some of these charlatans and pseudo-teachers, and still going on. But some of us have watched that. Others have actually gotten into it and learned their lesson and withdrawn. Hopefully it hasn't ruined them or spoiled them on religion and on philosophy and on Eastern paths or on spiritual practice itself. They will still continue to pursue and just look for a better teacher. Pretty much you can see an authentic teacher if he has no desire for you other than you get enlightenment, number one. And number two, if he can transmit you the essence of the scriptures, not just the words and the letter of the law, but the essence of the scriptures. And number three, if he lives a pure and stainless life. And number four, if he's a knower of Brahman. Those are the four criterion which Shankara put forth for an authentic teacher. And if you see those in your teacher, like I saw in Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, then I had no problem bowing at his feet. And he was there to transmit me the teachings and send me toward the highest path that I could possibly develop in this lifetime. So that's Guru Yoga, and that's empowerment. In Buddhism, empowerment has several stages, really. I mean, there's the 1,000-person empowerment, where they get these big halls, and they will have you repeat some preliminary mantra or something, and there's a kind of empowerment that goes on there. It's really kind of a filter. They want to see who's going to come up after and ask to be guided in the Dharma, and precious few do. It was that experience with Vivekananda too. He gave very powerful teachings on Vedanta and Yoga in New York in the early times, and the whole West End apartment he was in began to fill up with people who were even on the stairs and hanging out the windows and stuff trying to get in. But he found out that of all the people that came, only a few stayed with it. And so he called us straw on fire Americans. That was his term for us, straw on fire. We blaze up with enthusiasm when we first hear something, but then we can't hold the flame, hold the fire. So he said the British were much better at that. Therefore, people like Sister Advaita and others were very long-standing devotees of his, Goodwin and others who stayed with him right to the end, and gave themselves entirely to Mother India. Some even went there and gave up their lives in England. And of course there were a few exemplary Americans too that stayed. Sarah Bull and some of the other, you'll have to read about them and see. But the idea here being that empowerment needs to take. When you can't just keep getting empowerments over and over again, like getting Shaktipat over and over again, and expect something to happen. You have to go back to the teacher and get it again and again. So it's not taking in you, it's not settling in, it's not getting digested. It's just sort of spiritual menu tasting phases that you get into, and looking for this teacher and that teacher. And by now, since the 60s, when this all began to happen, late 50s, early 60s, and the organic farms and the ashrams and the various places that sprung up, most of which are all gone now, we should have learned our lesson and observed very carefully how that works in Maya, so that we can begin to develop the qualification to receive an empowerment and keep it when it happens to us. Like getting a mantra, that would be the Vedic version of that. In Tibetan Buddhism, yes, the mantra will happen, of course, but the empowerment happens early on. In Vedanta, you'll get the mantra from a teacher, and then you'll begin to practice that mantra and see how, sort of test the ground with that mantra. So in Tibetan Buddhism, that's called Guru Yoga and Empowerment, and it proceeds by seeking and developing a relationship with the teacher based on those 4 qualifications. In Vaishnavism, for instance, they say, there are different relationships. Mother and child is cited as a beautiful relationship, usually, and lover and beloved is cited as a very high and beautiful relationship. But they say that there's no better relationship than an authentic teacher and a qualified student. That surpasses them all, because the end aim of that is enlightenment. And there's no bones about it. That's what both are into it for, enlightenment, getting free. And other relationships, you look at them and you'll see, maybe there's some other pastime going on, or some intention, or some qualification. But this is what they say about the superlative teacher and the qualified disciple. So in developing a relationship with the teacher is very important. And as my teacher, Swami Sheshananda, used to say, a teacher has to be accessible. Can't be on a throne. Can't be on a raised dais. Can't be invisible and you never get to see him, like some of these teachers with millions of disciples. A teacher has to be accessible, right there with you, rolling up the sleeves, going through the whole thing with you. Higher than compassion is love. So he has to love the Atman in you, and you have to love the Atman in him or her. And if that's the case, then the relationship can go the full distance to enlightenment. So the relationship with the gurus or with the acharya is extremely important. Understand that if you go and spend time with the Indian people, how they feel about their guru. It's very wonderful. We don't have that here about our gurus very often. Part B there is quality for empowerment and gain the wisdom transmission. Or qualify rather. So that's what I was speaking of. The empowerment can just go right over you or right through you, like an electric charge, and you're just the same person again. But if you develop that quality of qualification, then when the transmission is given, it sticks. Sri Ramakrishna had a really good story about that. When photography was just an infant science, and at the end of his life, they took him to a studio. A photographer photographed him. This is the one where he has a pillar under his arm. He's dressed in a green jacket. He's got a pillar under his arm. They put that pillar there because he would fall over if you left him alone. He would go into samadhi at the slightest thing. He was so sensitive, spiritually speaking, he would actually just fall over. So the photographer would set him up, say, okay, leave him now, and then turn and go to the camera, and Sri Ramakrishna would start, falling over. And so they looked around the studio, and there was this pillar from some Roman set or something, and they put that under his arm, see, so he could lean on it. See, that's evidently the story. So, but the reason that he was so much in samadhi was the photographer had just showed him how photography works in that early time. It was that they had a plate, and then they put the solution over it, and then you snap the light, and the light would transfer through the lens and print itself on that glass plate, and then you'd make the paper photograph from that. But if you forgot to add in the silver nitrate to that solution, the image would not get captured. You could shoot again and again and again, and no image would get set on that glass plate. So the silver nitrate add in, then it would distill, and you'd see the image form. So Sri Ramakrishna, wasn't interested in photography or anything. He was interested in God. So he said, that's just like devotion and qualification. If the human form has love for God, when the guru starts talking about God, God will stick in them. In other words, they have the silver nitrate there in their mind, the silver nitrate of devotion. If it's not there, you can talk at them all day. Nothing will get impressed. You see. So a beautiful analogy he used, again with just a sort of an everyday experience that he's so famous for. So qualify yourself, hear the teachings, and they'll stick, and then you can go very deep with them. In fact, they can become a whole world for you. And that's how you abandon this world and you live inside. Intellectuals even do that. They're like the Einsteins and so forth will live in this realm of their own inner knowledge and kind of become divorced from the outer world. Time didn't tie his shoelaces, so he tripped over him and broke his arm. So he's not even, aware of what's outside. He's thinking about E equals MC squared, and everything is just completely taking him away from the outer world for a while. So even more so in case of spiritual life, when you start finding this Dharma, this Jnana Yoga inside of you, and how everything is made from it, drawn from it, in nature is even drawn from it, then you get very much enamored of it, and you want to spend more time inside. It's actually a preliminary to non-dual meditation, is meditation on Jnanam. Sukshma Jnana is called, meditation on the subtle. So you leave the gross and you meditate on the subtle. And you spend lots of time there. It draws you. So that's only happens then if you have qualified yourself, if you've gained a taste for it. Son went up to his father, said, "I've got a problem." Father said, "What's your problem?" He says, "I'm addicted to wine." And the father said, "What's wine?" And the son said, "Here, take some." So the father tasted it. And then the son said, "So now tell me that you've tasted it. Should I give it up?" He said, "Well, you should give it up, but I'm not going to." So you can see the gist of where I'm going with that. Now, 4 points concerning the process. Meditate 3 times a day with faith and devotion. This is the Tibetan way. Is how they want you to do sadhana. Meditate 3 times a day with faith and devotion. If the silver nitrate of faith and devotion is not there, your meditation is not going anywhere. And you can meditate for 10 or 20 years, and you can tell everyone, "I meditate." You haven't made 1 inch of progress yet. You're still the same place that you were 20 years ago. So put the qualification in there, and you can become a Buddha in 6 months. That's how Vivekananda put it. So very important to have those mainstays in there upon which you build this edifice of spiritual life. Can't be built on sand, Christ said. It has to be built on bedrock. 2, practice holding the mind in an unmodified state. Now there's your practice at non-duality. You can't assume it all at once. You can't jump from the lowest step to the highest step. It's beyond your capacity, number 1. Number 2, you're going to need to know what those middle steps consist of sometime. You're always going to be in question about the middle steps. If you jump from this lifetime to enlightenment, like some of these quasi-non-dualists want you to do, then you don't know anything about the cosmology, about the philosophy, and you're going to be worthless to help share this wisdom with other people later, if you can even make the jump. And possibly you make the jump. Non-duality is rather like a cliff without any fingernail holds. So it's very difficult to acclimatize yourself to it all at once. So practice holding a mind in an unmodified state. Basically with the father of yoga is going to be no vibrations, no thought vibrations. We call them vrittis. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Nirodha means no thought vibrations. Stop thinking. How long can you keep that train of thought from coming? And then when the train of thought goes by, how long can you keep it from coming, from the next train from coming when the caboose goes by, you see? Trains of thought are coming all the time with cabooses at the end. You have to grab that place in between each train and expand it so that you're not thinking the next train of thought is coming at you and you just let it go by. You don't entertain it at all. So you keep the mind in an unmodified state by that way, and you begin practicing non-duality. Realize that whatever appears comes from one's own mind. Might as well have been put second and this one third, but the other one third, but it still means the same thing, that I remember the Mahamudra teaching last 2 weeks ago, right? 2 weekends ago, that the mind is the source of all manifestation. Everything rises off it, like waves on an ocean. So that's part of the view you have to hold, that the mind is manifesting everything. These are the mind-only schools. Nature didn't have any part in it until the mind thought of it first. Nature came out of the mind, in other words. You have an eye, but you also have the power of the eye to see. And if you cut the optic nerve, the eye will not be able to function. But you're not going to be able to take away the power of the eye to see. It's already seen. And so it has formed an impression on it, inside of itself, how to see and what seeing is. So that's a whole different property of the mind. Seeing exists back in your mind. So does hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching is back in your mind. The origins to them are in the mind, not in nature. What can nature produce? It took it millions of years to produce a human form. You're trying to convince me that to see my relatives I have to go to the zoo? I was never a sperm. I was never a monkey. I was always the Atman. And I took on forms over time as I so desired, as my intelligence dictated. And if my intelligence was dim, I took on poor forms. And if my intelligence was sharp and honed, I took on refined forms. The mind is everything. Who said that? Sri Sharda Devi. The mind is everything, my dear. You must take it with you to Brahman. So you have to keep that mind in a fit and fettle shape, and part of it, keeping it fit, is to realizing that it's the source of everything. Everything create comes from the mind. Remember, the mind is not just your individual mind, but it's the collective mind, which means humans, animals, disembodied spirits, ancestors, heaven realms, gods, goddesses. That's the collective mind. If you get beyond them, you have what's called the cosmic mind. That's the Trinity. They're the most powerful. So cosmic mind, collective mind, individual mind, when we say everything has come from the mind, we mean that mind. That's a very vast realm of consciousness with many gradations, many strata. So the Tibetan Buddhists have obviously realized this, and they cherish that idea of mind, everything is mind made manifest. That's part of their view. Number 4, meditate constantly until conceptualization disappears. At first, conceptualization will keep occurring to the mind. You'll be a great thinker. You'll get good insights. You'll be able to shape the form of your chosen ideal in your head. But eventually your mind will get tired of that. It doesn't get tired of it because you don't meditate. So you don't believe in inaction. You don't believe in formlessness. But as soon as you start meditating, it occurs to the mind that there is a state called formlessness, and there is a bliss that's formless. Higher bliss is formless. And if it gets a taste of that, then it'll start getting tired of conceptualizing. You have to be very patient in this process. And when it gets tired of conceptualizing, then it'll start getting into non-dual states of mind. And you'll have periods of time where you'll just check out of the body, check out of the mind too, and then you'll come back into it. That's what you saw in Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He'd be gone, and then he'd be back a couple hours later, and then he'd be gone again. And when he was gone, you couldn't call him out. You couldn't say, hey, shout in his ear. Or a doctor touched his open eye once and he didn't blink. No, he was just like checked out of the body and mind. So he was going into higher states. Higher states means inner states. And that's what you're seeing. They're called different samadhis. Father of Yogas classifies them as different samadhis. Wisdom samadhis, concentration samadhis, bliss samadhis, and samadhis of ego samadhis, where the ego gets very fine. Basically 4 different kinds of samadhi in yoga with 4 subdivisions. I'm sorry, with 2 subdivisions. That makes like 6 different levels of samadhi. Now, number 2 here is Vajrayana practice. They call it shamatha, or dwelling in peace. Remember, in early SRV days, I taught some of you the shamatha meditation so that you could practice it. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G there under that great heading. Practice is to receive and observe the vows of the tantric vehicle. And basically, Tibetan Buddhism is a wonderful blend of yoga and tantra, plus mix in some of that Bon religion from Tibet. When Milarepa first got the teachings from Marpa, who got it from Naropa and Tilopa, brought it to Tibet over the Himalayas, then it had its inception around 700 AD. From then on, now they've been practicing it for 1,300 years. So they've developed over 13 centuries a very, very powerful vehicle there. So you have to take the vows of that tantric vehicle and observe them. And then purify the nadis and the centers for the flow of prana. We started out the class talking about how important the prana was. Nadis, you can use the word nerves, right? You have lots of nerves running through your body. But inside every nerve, there's 100,000 other nerves that you can't see. Those are called nadis. And they conduct a different energy called prana. And that's how health is. Mukhya prana, it's called. Great health is achieved by people who can control the prana. But some people stop there at controlling the prana and just being healthy. They're just a healthy animal. And that's as far as they'll go. But the yogis know that inside of those 1,000 nerves, they can connect to other centers than eating, drinking, and sex life. They can connect those nerves to this center, for instance. That's where you hear Om. Your first hearing of Om happens there, or just above the navel. See, that center where the ancestors are coming in and out, where pregnancy is happening, where food's getting digested. That's a powerful center there. You want out of it. If you're into spirituality, you want to open up this center. You hear the sound, and the sound will begin to take you toward the center, the third eye, the wisdom eye. So that's the way Kundalini Yoga is explaining it to you. And it happens by nadis. Prana then becomes psychic prana. It started out as prana of food. Prana of food got transmutated up, sublimated up the spine by your practice. That's why they're giving you the practice here. So you have to become aware of the nadis so you can begin to open up the energy, so you can sit like this all day. So you can live with breath or without breath. You can go into a breathless state. It's called kumbhaka. It's a kind of samadhi. And so nothing gets to you. You're impervious. You're just invisible. And you don't care about anything, and nothing cares about you. Krishna says that in the Gita. One of the 32 points of the Sanatana Dharma, in fact, in the Gita, is that he does not afflict the world, and the world does not afflict him. Isn't that beautiful? One of the 32 points of the immortal Dharma, toward the end of the Gita. He does not afflict the world. He's non-violent, and the world cannot afflict him. So not only is he not taking stock of what's out there, he's shut the curtain, he's closed the door, shut the gate, as the Zen Buddhist said. And then they've opened up this inner gate, and now they're engaging in nothing but subtle practices for the good of all beings. The opposite of violence. So that's a part of this practice. That prana will become psychic prana, and that psychic prana will abracadabra turn into Shakti. And that's where you get the word Shakti and its import. Shakti is not just creative energy that has no hub. It's sort of sporadic or something coming out of nowhere. But she uses the prana in people, in beings, to produce her works, her miracles, God's miracles to behold, as it says in the Bible. You see, that happens through prana, through life force. And Shakti is operating it. They liken Shakti to, a spider and sitting on a web, right? And the web is all over the place. And if anything touches the web, the spider knows. You see. So that web is prana. And the Divine Mother is that spider. And she can go anywhere, you see. She produces the web out of her own body, and she can take it back into her own body. right? Spider spins the web, draws it back in. So that's the analogy that's used in the Brihandara Yaku Upanishad and other Upanishads, is the spider in its web. That's Shakti, and that's a very, very reformed form of prana. Prana will become more evident as the worlds of name and form begin to manifest at grosser levels of vibration. Subtlest level of vibration was way back in the Word, and the Word is in her. Grossest level of vibration is way out there in a place called Earth. You are here. It's like the big star maps. You are there in the body on Earth. But you have to open up these inner pathways, and those are nadis. Those are nerve endings. Hundreds and thousands of them connecting to these different centers. When I pass away, it's going to be out of here. I'm determined, see, because I've seen that center. So this is where I want to be if I pass out and in. So throat, is speaking the truth. Heart is loving God. But anything below that is risky business. Lower heaven and higher heaven is both there. But heaven is not the goal of the Vedantas. So important, purify nadis and centers for the flow of prana, because it's not flowing there, you see. That is, it may be flowing, but you're not aware of its flow. If you're not aware of it, it might as well be closed to you. So knock, and it shall open. And then you'll see this prana is flowing everywhere, and you can get on it and ride it. That's what that great dragon bird, Garuda, you've seen Garuda in the Hindu mythology? That's what he epitomizes. His symbol is prana. Vishnu gets on his back and goes riding, you see, here and there. So that's an inner journey Vishnu's taking. Sometimes he takes it outward. So that's prana, very important point. See here, worship Vajravahini, embodiment of wisdom, and see all women as her. That's Divine Mother in Tibetan Buddhism. Also call her Tara. I like the form of Tara. Buddhism in general, Pragyaparamita, that famous sutra, is Mother of the Buddhas. Our founder, Lex Hixon, wrote a book called Mother of the Buddhas that everyone can look into if they want to find out more about the wisdom of the Vajravahini. D is visualize and meditate on the Herukas, Dakinis, in order to penetrate the world. The Herukas are male deities, the Dakinis are female deities. They're existing just outside this world, which means not out in space. It means outside the gravitational pull of matter into the next level of particle. Not atomic particle, but pranic particle. So they are guardians of the gate. And if you're aware of them, then when you pass away and have a conscious birth, you encounter them. Some of them might scowl at you, some of them might smile at you. It's called wrathful deities and benign deities. Whatever the case, you're not to react, you're just to move through them. How do you move through them? With a certain word. What's that word called? Mantra. So you work your way inside, through the guardians of the gate. These are Herukas and Dakinis. We have a different way of saying it in India. It's like Nagas and Naginis. Liquid gods who are rather like snake gods and snake goddesses who occupy the waters of existence. Ekarnava, the sea of existence that the soul gets out of. You can talk about placenta and the womb and the waters that are in there and being nourished by a mother's womb, but here you're being nourished by a different kind of ocean when you get outside the body, a different kind of plasma. And if you're aware of it, then you can see the deities. See, and you can go to the deities and ask them, no more birth in the womb of matter for me, please. Only emanation from my Divine Mother. I give up the worlds. I don't want to go to grade school and high school again in America. Thank you very much. I'm done with that for sure. Take me to some other world. Like God. Now, E. Establish a relationship with one chosen deity, Yidam, and merge in it. Here's your Ishtanishta in Tibetan Buddhism. We call it Ishtanishta, devotion to one ideal. Very important. It's one of the problems that I was talking about earlier about spiritual menu tasting and straw on fire and all those problems that we've been having as Westerners with commitment and so forth to spiritual paths and not going the distance and all of that. Part of the problem is that you need to get one chosen idea and realize it. Dig one deep well to strike water and give up digging all these shallow wells that get you nowhere. If you can strike water once, then you'll know that water is the same water in every well. You'll know the Muslims have truth, the Christians have truth. You'll be a Sanatana Dharmi. You'll be able to say, this water of Brahman is the water of Allah, is the water of Almighty Father, is the water of Tathagata Garbha, is the water of Yahweh. It's the same reality, it's just reached by different pathways, that's all. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna used to call that, Muslim goes to the lake, to one ghat, one landing place, and draws water and calls it pani, and then Christian goes, calls it water to a different ghat, and then the Greek goes to a different ghat, draws it, calls it aqua, and then the Hindu goes to a different god, calls it jari. So they're all the same water. They're just calling it by different names and they're approaching it at different ghats. That's one of Sri Ramakrishna's famous stories about universality. Sanatana Dharma, if you will. So you're not going to know that until you open up these nerve endings and these channels inside where all beings are in one huge state of consciousness, you see, with different gradations. So you have to pass through them to know them. Many people do, and then they forget them when they come back to earth in the body. Maya is so thick here that when you enter into the womb again, you forget what you've seen outside the body. And then it's only a matter of meditating, because you only remember it in your causal memory. You have that stored in your causal memory, so if you meditate deep enough, all of a sudden, boom, there's a memory that I haven't thought of for a long time. And it's not a memory of, my ancestors or my mother or my great-grandmother here on earth. It's a memory of something that I experienced outside the womb, before I took birth. And that's what Krishna says, you'll begin to see the chain of your lifetimes then. And when that happens, the house of cards called Maya comes falling down very quickly. You're like Sherlock Holmes, you're on the trail. The game's afoot, and you're not going to rest until you find that truth, which is your true nature. And then you join the ranks of the seers and sages. And then you do what you like. You can do anything you want then. Take a body, not take a body, it's up to you. Now, it gets, the practice here very well outlined, isn't it? It gets deeper when you realize the voidness of both the deity and the world. Now you're getting beyond form. First the world was there as real, then it became less real and your deity became more real. And you depended on your deity and the world went away. Now your deity begins to fade. You see, now what do I do? You see, oh, I see, it's up to me. See, the deities were in me and so was the world. It was all in me. This is what they're all, cackling about, like hens at the early harvest of worms on the barnyard floor. You see? Oh, it's all in me? Yes, of course it's all in you, but it's a capital U. See, you are the darling of your own worship. That's how the Tantrists put it. You are the deity, the darling of your own worship. All the time you've been worshiping yourself. It's just different forms of yourself. So now the word self takes on this huge ramification. You merge the 5 elements into the 5 senses, the 5 senses into the 5 subtle senses, the 5 gross elements into 5 subtle elements. You merge all those into the mind into the intellect into the great mind into the Trinity into the Word, and find the Word inside yourself. And that's going to happen if you begin to see through all conceptualizations. That's why back here they had you meditate beyond conception, right? It says here, meditate constantly until conceptualization disappears. So they were setting you up to get to this stage where when your deity starts to disappear in formlessness, you won't be put off by it. You won't be depressed. You won't be unhappy. You won't be like a straw on fire. You'll look around and you'll say, what's left when my deity goes away? And you'll have been geared for it. So you'll have been prepared for it. And finally, you gain realization of the Trikaya, the three bodies of the Buddha. We were just studying that last week at the Zen retreat, remember? The triple gem, the three bodies of the Buddha, the historical body of the Buddha, the Dharma teachings. See, the body of teachings, that's part of the body of the Buddha. So this is called triple gem in Zen and in Buddhism, and it's there in Tibetan Buddhism too. There it is, three bodies. Dharmakaya, or Dharma body of the Buddha, which confers all knowledge that all thoughts and phenomena are devoid of any independent identity. The Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, or the Buddha fields, confers the means by which the practitioner communicates with other practitioners in meditation. And the Nirmanakaya, or emanation body, confers the pure force of will, transcending karma, which is the yogi uses to benefit all sentient beings. So this is their interpretation of that triple body. Trikaya, it's called. All Buddhist schools have that, the Trikaya. It's very important to all Buddhist schools. There's not one that's absent from it. It's all very important, the three bodies of the Buddha. Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. Okay, stay with it. As we got another 25 minutes and we'll be able to bring this to a close. This is a big mouthful to bite off as far as precepts, practice, process, and all that. It's very well put together by the Tibetan Rinpoches and Tulkus and luminaries. There we arrive at the third post. Process of gaining quiescence and insight can happen now. First, accrue merit via offerings and prayers so as to clear subtle karmas. So, again, I just show you that. You're clearing karmas, you're having to clear some skaras, remember. Impressions, you can let go of them. And it's very hard for people to let go of them, so they can't make spiritual progress. Many of them can't even make religious progress. So they have certain things they're glomming onto, like life, for instance. It's one of the 5 kleshas I just mentioned at the first half. Clinging to life. Just reverse it and call it fear of death, whatever the case. That's a great impediment to your freedom. When a man's old, he's attached to anxiety. Why? Because death is coming. He thinks it's all over and done with. And it hasn't even begun yet, really. He hasn't even begun to realize the journeys he can take in other bodies. B. Meditate on the 100-syllable Vajrasattva mantra. I won't teach that to you right now. It's quite long. But that's an important mantra, and it happens at a very late stage. And C. Constantly strive for deeper insight. That, of course, is the dasa bhumikas, the 10 lands of bodhisattvahood. When they get their first, what we call jivan mukta over here, then they work on more and more power, more and more inner power they get. The powers of the Buddha, they call it. So they constantly strive for deeper insight that way. As far as quiescence, here's a note about it. Overcoming the mental process of attaining quiescence. First, overcome mental sluggishness, calm all mental tendencies. Pretty much that's tamas and rajas for us, isn't it? Tamas is slothfulness, rajas is restlessness. So that's what they want you to clear out of the mind. It's tendency to be sleepy and lazy, and it's tendency to be restless. So you want to clear those away from the mind, so even and calm, peaceful, like a flat line in meditation. Gain detachment from names and forms. Develop analytic insight. We'd call that going beyond namarupa and self-inquiry, right? I want you to analyze the nature of the self. Atma vichara. You can see how Mother India is there, the foundation of all of this. And then they want you to attain transcendent wisdom. That's going to be Atma Gyan. There's avidya, and there's vidya, and then there's paravidya, lower knowledge, higher knowledge, and then supreme knowledge, as we would put it in Vedanta, paravidya being supreme. So in the same way, you go beyond agyana to jnana, and from jnana to vijnana, as we would say. Attain transcendent wisdom. And all of that accrues to quiescence, if you want to know how to get even-minded. You get even-minded by destroying your ignorance. And the only thing to destroy ignorance is knowledge. The greatest purifier in the world, Krishna says, knowledge. So that knowledge has to be commensurate with the level of ignorance you're working on. Even Einstein said that. You can't solve a problem created at one level, with a solution that's also at that same level. You have to go to the next level and get the solution and then apply it back to the earlier level of the problem. So in the same way with spiritual life, you're going to have to get above the conventional ways that you would usually deal with ignorance and take a feather out of a higher pillow, you see, and use it. That brings us to the fourth and final post, direct perception of voidness. Here's where the going gets invisible. So that cliff without any fingernail holes, you're beginning to get into formlessness and acclimatizing yourself to formlessness. Lord Buddha talked about that too, at the highest peak looking down on the valleys. He was talking about it in the Dhammapada. Direct perception of voidness means A, refined mental readiness via analysis and formless concentration. So a part of our practice in SRV is to use the mantra in conjunction with the Ishtam, which is either Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother. You have a choice there. And then part of your meditation is on them, and the other part is emptying your mind of all conceptions and trying to develop formless concentration. Also, dissolve ordinary concepts and perceptions by perceiving their voidness, that is, their emptiness. Realize voidness in all stages of life. Then you bring it back to all stages of life. If you can see the original formlessness, then you can bring it back here and you can see it pervading throughout everything. That's where you see everything as empty. Shunyata, which is one of the highest Buddhist teachings. Shunyata, the void nature of being, they call it. It's void of... Maya is void and empty. So is reality void and empty. It's really much of a strange conundrum. That's where you get the idea of nirvana and samsara being interchangeable in the Diamond Cutter Sutra. Because what is Maya is empty of substance to fulfill you. It's empty of any solidity. It's all vibrating particles changing at a billionth of a second, so forth and so on. Brahman is empty of what? Worlds, name, form, sorrow, grief, passions, fetters. It's empty of everything that has anything to do with form. And so they say the void illuminating mind. Meditate on the void illuminating mind, because what's coming off it is just pure light, pure bliss. And it doesn't have an origin, so you can't really trace it to any beginning. So therefore, you can't really put your finger on it. It's the void illuminating mind. And then you bring that back, and Sri Ramakrishna said it's like putting on yellow glasses. You see everything yellow. So if you bring that void illuminating mind back with you out of meditation and put it on here, you see everything as void illuminating mind. It's all Brahman. That's where you get that idea, seeing God in everything. It's just the name of a couple books, chapters and so forth. Seeing God in everything. But you would have had to have gone the whole distance in order to make that really apply. You can't just give it lip service, pretend it. Finally, develop the mental agility necessary to attain the Mahamudra. So that's where we would bring out the Mahamudra chart, but you'll have to think back to 2 weeks ago when we saw the Great Seal and its view and its action and its all 3 levels of the Mahamudra practice. The Great Seal, that's one of the great teachings in Tibetan Buddhism. So good that you stayed with this the whole time through precepts, points, practice, and process of the Vajrayana path. It was so full that I could barely fit it on an 8x11, and I didn't have room for any quotes. But that, along with the Mahamudra practice chart that we looked at, and the idea of bardos, are 3 great Tibetan teachings. You might call them the 3 great pillars of Tibetan Buddhism. And they also borrow heavily against the Praticca Samutpata, the 12 links of rebirth, the nidanas they're called, and how that all brings the soul back into the body against its will in ignorance. Sri Ramakrishna talked about that as the kids catch a mongoose and they tie a brick to its tail, because if they let it go for even an instant, it's gone. So they know that how fast it is, so they tie a brick to its tail so it can't get up into its hole in the wall anymore. But even the strongest of mongooses, will drag the brick right up the wall and it'll get into its hole. But that weight is constantly pulling it down, so it's slowly losing its energy and coming out of the hole, scratching its way out of the hole. Finally it falls, and they have it as a perpetual captive. So Sri Ramakrishna is talking about another simple village story, which just means the karma that people die with. And they might get to heaven, but that karmic weight will bring them back into the body against their will, just when they were having the greatest time. So maybe that's the, how they say it, left behind theory in Christianity in reverse. All of a sudden, some certain amount of souls are taken up, their clothes are lying there. See, where'd they go? See, well, they got taken up to heaven, and we have to stay down here on earth. But if you look at that in reverse, see, that's left behind. But what about right behind? Right behind is that when you're standing there in heaven with your ancestors, you're talking to them, all of a sudden you disappear. The brick on your tail pulled you down the wall, and you're in a body again, and your mantra is wah, wah, wah. Well, that might not wash, in Christian philosophical circles. But it's very dearly marked by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who wants you to be free of these karmas, this baggage that you arrive at the station late at night, and there are no people around, no more trains, just a bunch of thieves out there in the thickets, and you can't move. You have a lot of baggage. You can't go for help because they'll steal it. You just have to sit with your baggage all night. So that's that karma that one accumulates over lifetimes and brings one back, sort of renders one helpless. And you see that in regards to people's lives all the time. They're not making any growth. See, so if we go back and talk about Vardate and the other transformations, see, then that's where you'll find that teaching of Ram. Very potent. That way, so you'll look deeper into the 6 transformations, and you'll see that growth is one of them. And you'll have a different idea about the nature of growth and what it means. That is, all growth is a kind of transformation, and transformation is ultimately unreal. But spiritual growth, that is something that you can utilize. That's something you can utilize because it's taking you beyond Maya. As they just said so nicely here, from avidya to vidya and to paramavid, from lower truth to higher truth. That's why we often chant that. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrichor ma amritam gamaya. Take me from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach me through and through with thy sweet and benign presence. So in that way, a soul comes to the end of their transmigratory process, transcends 6 passions, 8 fetters, 5 kleshas, and the 3 gunas, which we could look at another time, that was mentioned here too, and goes beyond the beyond, as Lord Buddha said, gatam, paramagatam, beyond all relative goals to the supreme goal. That's the kind of growth we want, if growth there be. So here I think we'll end a few minutes early and let you out to recess early. Just don't make your playmates the 6 passions and the 8 fetters, or if you do, keep them all under control. They said to Sri Ramakrishna, how do I get rid of lust? And he said, you can't. Can't get rid of the passions. They're your partners in life. Just keep them at a minimum. So it's a part of the mind, isn't it? They're in the mind when you're born. And some of them are more of a problem to you than others, and someone else has a more problem with a different one than you do. Maybe your problem is anger. Maybe someone else's problem is greed. Maybe you don't have any problem with the other 5, but one of them really gets you, see. So you try and keep it at a minimum, and therefore you won't develop any samskaras around it, and you'll be fine. You will reach the goal, as the Tibetan poet Milarepa sings. You will reach the goal. So here, let's end with a chant. Om Bhadram Karnabhihi Sriniyamadevaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabir Yajatraha Sthirairangayish Tushtivamsas Tanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these eyes, hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hare Om. Maybe we should take one more moment for the live streaming audience to tell them that there will be no live streaming next week. We'll be in San Francisco and on retreat at the American River thereafter. So you won't see us again in live streaming for a couple weekends. We'll be broadcasting from Portland, Oregon in our next live streaming class.
The new time zone schedule with all the classes to December is on the SRV website.
Check our SRV website for the new schedule on all of those times that include the time changes in different zones. And then you'll know when we're live streaming. Otherwise, make appearance at the retreat yourself. It's always better than live streaming to actually be right there with the 3 bodies of the Buddha, the teachings, the teacher, and the Sangha. So there again, so aloha, namaste. We will sign off here.